Alright, so today's video is about thinking, and it's a weird topic because not many people think about thinking. But it turns out that the way you think might actually be holding you back from reaching like Einstein-level genius. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's business partner and co-founder of Berkshire Hathaway, once said, "I constantly see people arise in life who are not the smartest, but they are learning machines." And in his book, Poor Charlie's Almanac, he actually talks about a strategy for thinking called the multidiscipline model. So today we're going over the multidiscipline approach to thinking and how it can help you outsmart everyone around you. But first, let's talk about the actual problem to how people think right now. Abraham Maslow has a quote that perfectly describes the problem that most people run into. "To the man with only a hammer, every problem looks like a nail." You can think of a doctor who only has a stethoscope, and he is fully committed to this stethoscope, and one day a patient storms in with a broken foot. To the doctor with stethoscope, he will only know how to check the heart rate of the patient, and because the person with the broken foot has an adrenaline rush, his heart rate is abnormally high. So the doctor gives him some medication to slow down his heart rate and tells him the problem is solved. You see the problem here though, the foot is still broken, and it's because the doctor only has one tool to diagnose the problem. Because he only has a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And this happens with thinking as well. You see, most people view the world in a very similar way to this doctor. They only have one lens through which to see any problem that comes their way. And the thing is, it's not entirely their fault. From the moment you were born, you start the process of learning. You're put in school, and school forces you to keep niching down more and more until college, where you finally get to choose the one lens that you're going to use for the rest of your life. This is also largely correlated to the job you're going to have as well. Whether it's a mathematics lens to see the world in an analytical way, or psychology to see the imperfect patterns of human behavior. The problem still stays the same though. You only niche down to one lens through which you see every problem, and so you're like that doctor who only has the stethoscope to diagnose problems. Charlie Munger, who was Warren Buffett's business partner and co-founder of Berkshire Hathaway, actually understood this very well, and he has a concept in his book called the multidiscipline way of thinking, which is supposed to help. He said, "You must know the big ideas in the big disciplines and use them routinely. All of them, not just a few. Most people are trained in one model, and they try to solve problems in one way. This is a dumb way of handling problems." What multidiscipline thinking is using ideas from different fields like psychology, mathematics, economics, biology, history to solve complex problems instead of just relying on one tool. Charlie calls each of these fields mental models, and how he talks about them is forming a sort of map in your mind with all these different mental models, just forming connections in between them and being able to use whichever one you need when a problem arises. The core idea of multidiscipline thinking is that when a problem does arise in your life, instead of just having one model to look at that problem with, you have all these different mental models in your head that you can look at the problem with and then choose the best one to deal with it. But what exactly are these mental models, and how can you put them into your mind so that you can actually use them in your everyday life? Well, there's 5 main models that really shine in the world that will help you use this way of thinking, and we're going to use a person to represent each of them. A psychologist, an economist, a biologist, a historian, and a mathematician. For every mental model, there's different tools associated with it so that you can use them to deal with unique problems in unique ways. For example, in biology, everything is seen as natural selection, where only the strongest survive. This framework of natural selection can be used in sports, business, and anything that has to do with competition. On the other hand, in math, you have concepts like compounding, which can be used in your daily habits or in the stock market. For every problem that you will ever face in the world, there's going to be a mental model to help you, and so the more disciplines that you learn, the easier it's going to be to find the right hammer for the right nail. And this is going to be the thing that helps you outsmart anyone around you. But first we have to go over these 5 mental models. First up, you have the psychologist. Munger warns that you've got to know human misjudgment. The psychologist largely thinks in terms of cognitive biases. They sort of understand the ins and outs of human nature. They know that people fear losing things more than they do gaining things. They know that people value the present more than they do the future, or that people will stop at nothing to keep convincing themselves of their already there ideologies. This way of looking at the world sort of allows you to predict people's actions and kind of understand why people do what they do. Second is the economist. Charlie said, "Show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome." The economist maps out the incentives and the opportunity costs. They're actually very similar to the psychologists, except they look at things from the top down instead of from the bottom up. They start with the market as a whole and sort of derive human tendencies from the moves that a business makes. Third is the biologist, inspired by Darwin's theory of evolution. The biologist will see everything from the stance of survival of the fittest. Every game that is played, every business run, every problem in front of you is seen as a sort of ecosystem. There's a landscape, there's a game being played, and there are clear winners and losers. The game is either survive or die. Then you have the historian, Personally, my favorite model. Charlie said, "Show me the history of man and I'll show you what to expect." A historian connects all modern events to events in history. Since human nature doesn't really change, a lot of the problems that people faced in the past are the same problems that we face now today. And understanding how those people got through those problems in the past is sort of that lens that you use to get through problems in your own life. And finally, last is the mathematician. The mathematician sees the world in a very analytical way. The way to get through problems is very analytical and logical, and there's always a clear solution, just like a complex math equation. The mathematician is incredibly good at seeing things like compounding or the Pareto distributions in everyday life. Now, at first it seems like all of these are sort of pointing at the same thing, and they kind of are. They're all pointing at the same sort of concepts that I guess we call reality. But the idea of being a multidiscipline thinker is being able to switch in and out of each of these models so fast that your opponent looks like a linear thinker just because of how fast you are and how good you are at adapting to different problems using these different models. Me being a historian, let me give you a couple clear examples from history for when this has happened. A very clear example of a multidiscipline thinker versus a linear thinker is the board versus Steve Jobs at Apple in 1985. You see, during this time, Apple was a bit cash strapped. People were beginning to move away from the Apple II and onto the next thing. In this case, most of the board members took the role of the pure economist. They only saw the bottom line and saw that the Apple II was still their highest performing item, even if sales slumped a bit. But Steve, being a multidiscipline thinker, saw that people wouldn't buy the same product forever. They wanted something new and innovative. And so using the lenses of psychology and economics and history, he could see that they needed to keep spending on new inventions. This led to Steve Jobs getting kicked out of Apple, and Apple almost went bankrupt because of this. A very similar thing happened with Hannibal at the Battle of Cannae. The Roman forces took a single view of the battle. They simply lined up all their soldiers compactly together and stormed straight at the center, just like they always had. They only had the historian approach. But Hannibal understood history and he understood psychology. And he understood these because he studied Alexander the Great from history and the psychology of the past. He knew if he could bait the Romans into storming through the center of his army, then they would feel confident and they would feel like winners and they would overextend. And that's exactly what happened during the battles. Roman went for the bait and Hannibal was able to surround them, and it was a complete massacre from there. When you think in multiple disciplines, you can think way faster than anyone who thinks in a linear sort of way, which is most people. So it's good to have multiple tools at your disposal to tackle any problem in life. But how do you actually integrate these mental models into your mind? Well, the first thing is that you have to be extremely conscious of it. Whenever you have a problem arise in your life, you can ask yourself the question, through what lens am I seeing this problem? So let's just take a very basic problem, which is getting work done without getting distracted. The problem is getting distracted and the objective is to get more work done. Well, first put a psychology lens on it. Why are you checking your phone? Well, because of present bias. You overvalue the now instead of the future. So simply taking away anything that gives you instant gratification will fix the problem. Or you can look at it from the mathematics approach and use Parkinson's law. Work expands to fill the time allotted. So maybe you can set really harsh deadlines and then set up a time limit to scroll after. Or you can put an economics view on it where you write down the opportunity cost of scrolling on your phone and then look at how much productivity you give up when you scroll. The point is that when you have all of these lenses, you can sort of look at a problem and sort of shift through all of these mental models and choose the best way to approach the problem. And this is a genius way to beat anyone who you come across. So when you have a problem arise in your life, just be conscious of it. Either put on the mathematician hat or the historian or the psychologist or the economist or the biologist, and then choose the right tool for the job. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. If you want daily doses of historical wisdom, you should check out Histos down below in the description. And if you got something from this video, then you might also enjoy this other video where I teach you how to think like Einstein. So that's it. See ya.